This is a bargain basement keyboard. It's a Casio. It actually produces sounds. It also records. It also has MIDI capabilities. It's an all-in-one sort of a production studio, kind of. And the problem with it is if I want to change out the recorder, if I want to change the sounds in here, then I've got to replace the entire keyboard. This is a MIDI controller. It only produces MIDI signals. Now, the engineers who designed the MIDI specification figured out that if they separate out the signals from that are being generated by a device from the actual sound source, then they figured out there was a great deal of flexibility that could be provided. What I have here right now is a computer program that generates sounds based off of MIDI signals that it receives from a MIDI device such as a MIDI controller. I have a MIDI controller hooked up here right now, and I've got two different what they call soft synths. Synth just means it's a shorthand version of the word synthesizer, which means that it synthesizes sounds. They call it soft synths because it's software that's producing the sounds. I've currently loaded in two different types of synthesizers, and now I'm going to show you how MIDI can control those the output of the sound from those synthesizers. The signals that a MIDI device produces are actually called messages. Any device or piece of software that captures messages or records messages from a MIDI device is called a sequencer. Okay, let's take a look at the messages that are being sent. This actual row represents two different messages. It represents a note on, and it also represents a note off message. I'm sure this is a little bit misleading, but if you can think of this as two different MIDI messages. The note on message tells a device to turn on a particular note, and this is the note that is telling that device to turn on. This is C3. Channel number just says, I'm going to be sending this number out on channel 1, and any devices that are tuned to listen to channel 1 are going to receive this note on message, and they're going to play this particular note. A second piece of information that is sent along with the note on message, besides the actual note, is something called velocity. The velocity is basically how hard you've pressed on the key or pressed on the drum pad, and it's usually in terms of a number that's in the range of 0 to 127. And you'll see that I struck the key with a velocity of 105, velocity 126. I hit it as hard as I possibly could. 53 means that it was really soft, so this is going to control how hard or how loud or how softly the note is going to be played. Now, if we take a look at the off velocity, this is actually the velocity associated with the note off message that is not actually displayed here. But the idea is that I turned on this note, and for a certain amount of time I'm going to let that note play out, and then at the end of when I send the note off message, I'm going to say turn the velocity to 0. Okay, let's walk through some basic MIDI messages. Here's the note on and note off message. Here's the pitch bend. Here's modulation. Here's a program change. Now let's take a look at all the wonderful messages we created. Okay, we've got Aftertouch, which basically tells us that after I touched the key, I changed my pressure a little bit, and these are the numbers representing that. Here's my note on. And note off, actually. Pitch bend. Controller change. That was my modulator. Program change. I never use a MIDI controller to trigger sounds on my computer, mainly because my particular computer and the devices that I'm using introduce a lag time that's unbearable when you're trying to play. I'll give you an example here. If you're experiencing that type of lag time, then it might be a good idea for you to purchase a different MIDI device that's explicitly for the use of producing sounds. Sometimes they're called keyboard modules. Sometimes they're, or you can just like get a synthesizer, a real synthesizer. I use the device. I use the MV8800 to trigger all my sounds. This is the Roland MV8800. It doesn't actually have a keyboard, but it can produce sounds. Drum pads have a pretty nice aftertouch, and if you wanted to, let's say, do a drum roll on the snare, you hold down the roll button and then you play the snare, you press it harder, it gets louder, you lighten up on it, it gets lighter. Which is really useful when you're doing like a jazz composition, for instance, like this, jazz quartet. And of course I overemphasize for dramatic effect. Anytime you get a new MIDI device, that device comes with a regular chart of its capabilities. And if you take a look at the chart, it usually tells you things like what channels it can transmit on, whether or not it can handle different notes, whether or not it transmits different messages versus what messages that it recognizes, and there's some remarks about the different messages that it accepts. Take a look at these things whenever you get a new device so that you know exactly what the capabilities are. Okay, that's it for today. Next time we're going to take a look at some more advanced topics such as MTC, sliders, control knobs, and other things that we can use to control other MIDI devices. I appreciate you watching. My name is Kenneth, and I hope you peace.